I thought that millennial dads were the most hated generation of men. But after this past month that I've taken off of YouTube, I came to discover that the real hatred is actually being directed at men with traditional family values. You know, the kind of man that strives to be strong both physically and mentally. A man who does his best to try and fulfill his role as a husband and a father, one who honors God with his life and does his best to work hard and provide for his family. A protector who is capable of defending his family. A man who takes his role as the leader of his family seriously and makes decisions that benefit the whole family. This type of man is becoming extinct because everything in modern day society is aimed at keeping men weak. It's aimed at keeping the traditional family man at bay and nowhere near the mainstream popular thought. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing 5 different ways traditional family men are going extinct and what we can do to prevent it. Let's go. What's going on, fellas? Welcome to Alpha Dad Consulting, where we focus on providing tools and resources for traditional family men to create the family life they want. That's right. If you have been listening or watching this show for a while, you know that this is a business that continues to evolve. And I've decided that from this point forward, that I don't want to limit our reach by focusing on just one generation of men, but rather men that understand the importance of traditional family values and that are working hard to invoke that in their own home. Although in our modern day society, it is not easy to make this happen. If you're like me, trying to be a traditional family man in a modern day society, it almost feels like a losing battle. Yet, I'm here to tell you that it doesn't have to be that way. Now, don't get me wrong, it is definitely a battle. Hell, it might even be considered a war that's going on right now. But it's not a war that we have to lose. In fact, we're probably the only ones strong enough to actually win it. However, there's no winning a war without first understanding who your enemy is and determining which strategies are going to be effective at defeating it. So let's do a deep dive on 5 of these enemies and how they're destroying the traditional family man. Number 1, the news. I can't even begin to tell you the last time I watched an entire hour of news. In my house, we don't watch the news. It's been that way ever since my wife and I got married close to 12 years ago. If you devote time to watching the news every day, it's almost been scientifically proven at this point that it will put you in a bad mood. Why? Because it's always bad news. Have you ever wondered why it's always bad news? Well, it's because bad news draws attention. Good news doesn't sell. Think about these past couple of years with the Rona, right? When it was at its peak, the headlines were always about how many people died from it, but they never gave you the numbers of the survivors. Those that actually got the Rona with other health conditions and beat it naturally with their own God-given immunities. Where was that news? I know when I had it and I was feeling like I couldn't breathe, watching some news about how many people survived it would have given me much more hope than the way I was feeling at the time. I mean, think about it. Have you ever wondered why the primetime news hour is from 10 to 11 p.m.? The majority of people that gotta go to work the next day fall asleep shortly after watching the news. What do you think their last thoughts are before going to sleep? Bad news produces bad thoughts, and those are the thoughts most people fall asleep with. No wonder suicide rates are up. Anxiety is up. More people dependent on drugs and alcohol to numb the pain. Some people are so consumed by what the talking heads on the news tell them that they live in constant fear. I still see people driving around alone in their car with a mask on. Who are you afraid of being infected by when you're alone in your car? The influence the news media has over people is ridiculous. They do your family no favors. All they want is for you to be fearful and believe what they tell you. They're not concerned with telling you the truth. They're concerned with ratings, views, money, and the news is not your friend, guys. You want to get to know how the media operates a little better? Read a book called Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday. I'll leave a link in the description below on YouTube, or you can check out my resources page at alphadadconsulting.com/resources. That book will trip you out once you see how the entire media or news media organization really works. The best strategy I can recommend on this is just stop watching the news in your household. Unless you're watching a weather broadcast due to a storm or something, even so, they have mobile apps that are a lot more accurate than the news. And if you're saying to yourself, well, gee, I have to stay informed. How am I going to do that if I don't watch the news? I'll tell you this. The only way you can be informed is if you know the truth. The news media, no matter the network, does not care about telling you the truth. They care about getting you to see whatever happened through their perspective. Instead of giving you the facts and having you form your own conclusions about what happened, they tell you what to think and how to feel about the event. That is not journalism. You have a little mobile device in your hands that you can use to dig up the truth from other reliable sources. Find out what those are for you, but stop relying on mainstream media for the truth because you're not going to find it there. Number 2, entertainment. This one's a hard one for me because I do like my fair share of entertainment. I grew up watching a lot of movies and TV shows, playing a ton of video games as well. But when I was young, things weren't as easily accessible as they are now with streaming services like Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, etc. It's never been easier to access entertainment. Social media, of course, also plays its role in this, offering a ton of distraction and entertainment. I mean, it is easy to get sucked into distractions nowadays because everything is just so easy to get. Because of this, entertainment has now become a medium for these enemies to push ideologies that go against traditional family values. I mean, look at a lot of these kids shows and movies nowadays. They keep injecting LGBT stuff in our kids shows for what reason? What place does sexuality, straight or not, have in a kid's cartoon or movie? Why not just make it a program for kids? Unless there's a hidden agenda. My son right now, he's into dinosaurs. And there's this show on Netflix that he watches called Camp Cretaceous, which takes place in the whole Jurassic Park world. Not gonna lie, even my wife and I got into it and started watching the show with him, as it happens with your kids sometimes. The new season just dropped and they now plugged in a scene where 2 of the female leads who are in their teens are now romantically involved. They never insinuated any of that in previous seasons, but all of a sudden it's in there now. So now my son will no longer watch that show. The Buzz Lightyear movie that just came out had a similar scene and got flack for it as well. Look, I could care less what your preference is. It's a free country. Do whatever you want. But don't force feed my kids through a medium that you have control over to influence them to think like you. They're not your kids. They're my kids. My wife and I planned them. We had them, and we have every right to raise them with the morals and values that we want to instill in them. Marvel movies and shows that were once, at least for my family and I, very entertaining to watch, have now become filled with all sorts of agendas, from feminist ideologies where they make men look like bumbling idiots, or where they market movies and shows based on the male lead and then have a female supporting character come in and completely hijack it on purpose. They just did this with Doctor Strange, second movie, right? They made it more about Scarlet Witch than him. Of course, they had to throw in that young girl the movie revolves around that had 2 moms. Like, the movie was a disaster instead of just making it about the guy whose name is in the title. Here's the thing you want to pay attention to, is that all of this is on purpose. There's no coincidence to why these things are happening. So be cautious of the forms of entertainment that you permit to enter into your household. The way that the entertainment industry is going, it doesn't look like they're going to stop trying to inject political agendas into shows and movies. Remember that your dollars have voting power when it comes to this stuff. If it doesn't suit you and your family, don't give them your hard-earned money. Number 3, politicians. Up until 2016, I stayed away from politics. I took no interest in it, and I really didn't care who was in the Oval Office. I honestly hadn't even voted yet, but I did that year. And after that, I started waking up to the toxic landscape that is the world of politics. And what I've come to realize is that a lot of these politicians that get elected are truly evil people. These are the people that have been elected to run the government, which was originally designed for security and infrastructure, right? protect our borders, keep the bad guys out, and provide us with roads and security within the country through the use of police. But damn, have they messed this whole thing up. With everything that they promise and the amount of taxes that they take from your hard-earned income every 2 weeks, you would think that we'd be living in a freaking paradise, but we're not. It doesn't really matter if they're left or right people. Most of them are corrupt and are not remotely interested in making your family life better. Look at how badly the court system is set up against men when a divorce occurs. A lot of men are stripped of their rights as a dad and end up being cast out of the family. In fact, a lot of state-issued programs welcome that outcome. They'll help a single mom all day get welfare and Section 8 government-funded support with your tax dollars, plus make the guy pay child support. Try doing that as a single dad. Good luck. Who do you think makes all these lovely laws? It's the politicians. Right now, look at what they're trying to do with gun laws. Anytime there's a mass shooting, for the most part, he is always stopped with a gun. Yet they keep trying to take that right away from the citizens, as if more laws will keep criminals from getting a hold of weapons illegally. I mean, they're freaking criminals. By definition, they are law breakers. So how are more laws going to stop them? I would love to see every politician hand out tasers and pepper sprays to their security team and take away their guns to demonstrate how brave they are in their stance against gun violence. For any rational person, you know that they would never do that. So why would you let them do that to you? Pay attention to politics, my fellow Alpha Dad. As much as I hate it, you have to be vigilant. These politicians are not your friends and they don't care about your family. Vote when it matters and make sure you really understand the ideologies that the person you elect is trying to push. If they align with your beliefs and values, they might be a good fit. But if they don't entertain them nor give them any power over you, because they will abuse it. Number 4, school. One of the other institutions highly controlled and funded by the government. I'm actually reading a book on this topic right now called Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Gatto. I'll put a link for this one too if you want to check it out. But this guy was a highly respected and awarded public school teacher for about 30 years and ended up changing his whole perspective on school and how it ruins you and your family. I'll give you a couple of the points that stood out to me about this. So do you know how most people nowadays don't completely finish what they start? Like they'll get really excited about something and do it for a few days or for a few hours and then they drop it. Maybe it's working out consistently or reading a book every day. At first it feels good, you're excited and motivated, but then after some time you drop the habit and revert back to not doing these things. Well, the author of this book makes the argument that school has conditioned us to not be finishers. If you think about it, when you were in school, and let's say you were in the middle of an engaging project or lesson, then all of a sudden the bell rings, right? What happens to that lesson and experience? It gets cut short and takes you out of that engaged state you were in. Off to your next period you go. You might have been engaged in a unique lesson on world history. Then all of a sudden, now you got a few minutes to get to your geometry class. You were conditioned to get cut off before you even had a chance to see something through. This type of conditioning has carried over into other areas of our life where we don't commit to finishing what we start. If your kids are in public school, they are being conditioned that way as well. If you were conditioned that way, you're more than likely exemplifying that at home without even realizing it. I know when I was in school, just knowing that the bell was about to ring would completely tune me out from what I was doing, even if it was engaging work. Ultimately, I really didn't care. I cared more about getting out of there. Even now as adults, when we go to work, even if you're engaged in your work, once that clock says it's time to go, most of us are out the door and don't care about completing the work. The other thing that was called out by the book is surrounding this concept of homework and how stupid it really is. You send your kids to school for 8 hours a day or so, only for them to receive homework from that school that takes them away from spending valuable time with you in the evening or on weekends. My fifth grade teacher was a great teacher, but he gave us a ton of homework that would take me about 3 more hours of my time in the evening to complete. And this was true almost every year after that during my time at school. I literally never ate dinner with my parents simply because I either had a lot of schoolwork or I would pass out from being kind of mentally drained from the day at school. I remember some days passing out after getting home right around 4 p.m., then waking up at about 7, quickly grabbing dinner, taking it to my room, and then starting on my homework where I would stay up until about midnight. Then go to sleep late, wake up tired the next morning, and start the cycle over again. I rarely saw my parents in the evening, and it was no wonder how little influence they had over me growing up, especially in my teens. I was always being influenced by outside sources simply because I spent the majority of my time outside of their presence. School made that easy, and my parents reinforced it by requiring me to do well in school. Me getting good grades was how they measured how good of a kid I was. What a freaking joke the system is. The good thing is that a lot of people are starting to see that and pulling their kids out of school. We've decided in our household, even before our kids were born, that they will be homeschooled. My wife and I have put ourselves in a position where we can make that happen. If you want to be a dominant influence in your children's life, I would encourage you to get them out of school. Put yourself in charge of your kids' education. Don't let the government do it for you. They literally don't care about your kids. They just care about control and breeding more employees they can tax income on. Number 5, churchianity. This is a big one for me and a hard one to confront because I sort of grew up in church. By the way, I got the term churchianity from a man named Myron Golden. That guy is a phenomenal speaker and entrepreneur. Definitely recommend you check out his channel because he has a lot of good stuff surrounding God and entrepreneurship. Anyways, getting back to the point, growing up in church from participating in the Baptist denomination and then the Nazarene denomination, and then it was non-denominational, I've had a lot of experience being around churches. Not to mention when I was in a Christian hip hop group for about 7 years, we performed at different churches almost every weekend. Even though they were all different denominations, there was always an underlying theme that would play out at almost every church we went to. It was always difficult to find real, authentically honest people. Let me sort of explain that a little further before I get crucified in the comments. Within the context of a church setting, there is a certain expectation for how you should act, and if you don't act that way, you are somehow looked upon as a sinner or an outcast of sorts. So in order to fit into the congregation, most churchgoers will simply just conform and play along. It seems to me like most people walk on eggshells trying not to display any of their weaknesses out of fear of being criticized. With men that are churchgoers, it's even more apparent. You'll have some churches that will have a men's group, but they won't talk about anything real. Like they won't talk about how they might be struggling with some sort of addiction or that they're having trouble in their marriage, particularly in the bedroom. They won't freely admit that they have feelings of inadequacy when it comes to leading their family. They won't admit if they feel lost. Hell, they won't even really ask for help even when they absolutely need it. They'll simply say what? Hey, brothers, just asking for prayers for me and my family. That's it. That's all you get, because if they tell you what's really going on, which is the actual truth, within the context of the church, they will be crucified, or at least they will feel like they will. This is why with Alpha Dad Consulting, I don't really emphasize religion as a prerequisite for being a part of it. There's other men organizations that are for Christian men, and that's great. But I think it's important to have real conversations where we actually wrestle with the truth, because even when the truth is ugly, at least you know what you're working with. At least now you have a place from where to build on. Unfortunately, it's been my experience that in many churches across the U.S., this is lacking. The facade of acting holier than thou just to protect your status has become its own religion, which is hurting the traditional family man. It's forcing these men to act in a certain way at church in front of other people and then be a totally different man at home. I'm not saying every church is failing men or that you shouldn't go to church. I'm sure there are a number of churches out there who are authentic and don't dance around the truth when it comes to helping families. I mean, even my family and I just found a church that seems to be pretty good, but we're still testing the waters with it. It's not easy trying to lead and provide for a family while trying to keep these enemies at bay. But the second we decided to put a ring on that finger and form a family, we made a decision and entered into a role that makes a huge impact on those in your household. The question is, what kind of impact do you want to have on your family? Do you want to be the type of family man that protects them from these enemies? Or would you rather let them be influenced by these enemies? If you're tired of trying to answer these questions on your own and going at this battle alone, then I want to invite you to join our Alpha Dad Consulting Facebook group. I'll link it in the description as well if you want to check it out. You can also just search for it on Facebook groups. If you just type in Alpha Dad Consulting, it'll pop up. I will be doing some lives and post some exclusive trainings there that you won't find anywhere else. It is a brand new group, so bear with me as I get it populated with more content. So there you have it, guys. 5 ways that the traditional family man is under attack right now. Please don't fall prey to these things. I hope you found value in this. And if you did, please share it. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. And if you're listening to the podcast, please consider leaving me a review. All right, my fellow Alpha Dad, I'll catch you on the next one.